Hey everyone, Orionsgear here. So, I got to witness the major content drops live on Twitch, and I have to say it was a glorious experience. But yeah, I'm going to give you a rundown, frame by frame, hopefully, to really show you what's going on. So, at the very start, there is an incredibly deep, almost didgeridoo voice, clearly hinting at the man on the wall, which then the camera then goes to a figure who is wearing a blue coat with some form of earpiece, rings on his fingers, gilded in gold, who then holds out some form of PDA or phone. We also have the living embodiment of Bingus in the shot as well. Now, the actual name of this hairless cat is Kalymos. Now, Kalymos is the pet of Albrecht and Entrati. Now, because of this, and of the leak that happened in June, I believe this is a clear reference to Albrecht being the figure that we see in a blue coat. Anywho, also might be Mr. Scratchykins that Otak references. What sort of name is Mr. Scratchykins if you're not referring it to some form of cat? We then pan to a large laboratory where the Iatan statue exclusive to Deimos is sitting on the desk, along with old PC tech with a large porcelain figure in the background, and this butler figure breaks the coffin that blue-coated person steps into. Now, after this, we then follow Lloyd as a Warframe into the room that we usually cannot access in a Warframe form, but only in Void form. Now, literally go up and the entire room turns into a larger room. It is a phenomenal reveal, in my opinion. But yeah, we follow Lloyd. He comments that a precept was activated, leading the Void to destroy the eternal clock, and the Requiem law is then seen on both sides of the room. Lloyd has one precept, and that is to awaken the sleeper. Now, I want to stop here and discuss the reality of Lloyd's precept activation, because the way that in the Nora logs that were released up to this point, we have one about Latrox Un. We have a short story where Latrox Un is analyzing the infestation, and he notices that the statistics for growth patterns of specific flora are different, and the exocrine moves slower, specific plants aren't blooming, and the capillaries are pumping blood faster. Now, basically what I'm trying to say is that Deimos fears something. It fears something or someone passing through or going near it, which is why the entire ecosystem of Deimos is reacting this way. It's the same way an octopus would blend into its surroundings when confronted with a threat, because active camouflage is a survival instinct. And because of that, they want to get away from the danger as quickly as possible. The second short story that we have here is one about a specific doctor who notices the fingernails are cracked and shattered and worn well. That resembled more stress to the fingernails rather than weak keratin. So this doctor ends up asking his wife to leave. Now, when the wife leaves and the doctor asks again, "Are you okay? Or do you need any help?" The guy gets a wide grin on his face and says, "No, I'm fine. Never better, actually." And without cause, she lets him go. A few days pass, and more miners come to the doctor with the same complaints, where they're complaining about broken hands, broken fingernails. And then one day they all stop. Because it's a small town, she learns that most people are actually part of this mine. Most of the adults, in fact. And because this only affects adults, and because there was a wide grin involved, these are two clear fingers being pointed at the man in the wall, because the signature wide grin is pretty much synonymous with the man in the wall. And, with the first guy, the complete removal of any emotion when confronted by the doctor, saying he never felt better. At the very start, he was actually complaining about his fingernails hurting and wanting them to get better and stronger. This doctor ends up going down to the town mine and seeing everyone using their hands and small tools to dig. She even saw someone digging with tools for a certain amount of time, but the person dropped the tool and then continued to use a sledgehammer, and once the sledgehammer broke, then they would just use their hands, which explains why everyone had their fingernails cracked. Anywho, she then admits to Nora. She goes on to say, well, I actually ended up loading the pit full of dynamite and blowing it to Phobos, and there were either 3 survivors or 3 victims. I can't quite tell, and there aren't many context clues, but it sounded devastating, so I'm more likely to lean towards there are 3 people left and the survivors are calling it an accident. But it turns out that the way that all of these void thralls were digging, they were actually trying to dig through the planet, or through whatever body that they were sitting on, because they wanted to go to Deimos. Now, rough retelling aside, there's something of note here, where if you don't know much about Warframe as a whole, there are multiple instances of mind control happening. One specific case, and funnily enough, this frame comes from Deimos, is Zaku. And even more so, if you look through Zaku's list of abilities, you'll find 3 Requiem words that come from one section of the poem. They gaze, accuse, and deny, I believe it is. I believe it's accuse. Now, accuse actually casts a sort of hypnosis onto enemies, and you can turn enemies into allies for a certain amount of time. Now, his design shows not only his Kagegura skin is not only is influenced by Greek pottery. Kit is designed around using the void to fuel his abilities, even more so than the other frames. Oh, it leads me to this theory about void mind control. Now, whether it was done by Zaku, probably not. It was probably the man on the wall because of the signature smile. I just thought it was really interesting to point out, and I don't think anyone else has really made that connection yet. And the last Nora log is about a conversation between Bones and Nora about having this dream that is not possible for someone like them, being impossible, and because of this, he feels like he's losing his grip on reality. I'm just going to use his because it's Lloyd, right? It's Lloyd. He uses the moniker Bones. He's clearly too polite and too sophisticated to understand that only he speaks like this, and because he only speaks like this, he's the only one that's going to deliver such eloquence through his text, especially when he's trying to lie through his teeth, which is yeah, it didn't quite work out because I was fooled for a little bit until I realized, there's one line where he goes, oh, Deimos? Oh, who would go there? Huh. Now, if you've seen anyone try and talk like that, it's almost as if they're trying to weasel out of something, but hey, nice try. Anywho, Bones, quote unquote, goes on to talk about how there was a sequence of events that has happened, and due to him hearing Corpus, Latrox Un, and the Doctor talk about it on Nora's supposedly radio show, activated a protocol, a sequence of events, if you will. Wink, wink. And this leads Lloyd to find someone who is well adept with dealing with the unknown, which leads me to believe that between the events of the first Nora log and the start of the Whisper in the Walls event is where Lloyd comes to the realization that he needs to hire or acquire the services of the Tenno, because as we all know, we are well and truly adept at jumping into the unknown. Now, this all makes a lot more sense once you've pruned through all of the information, because looking at the Nora logs and the things separately as 2 different entities, they don't quite fit together, but they all lead into one another when you really read through it. Now, going back to the introduction of the Whisper in the Walls, to awaken the sleeper, we walk down a spiral staircase leading to a large door. They did a fantastic job on the new tile set, by the way. It looks fantastic. Opening the first large door leads to a large grey figure who looks to be made of clay or cement. Now, typically, figures in grey are typically ones that are larger than life, because we only have a very few figures that look like they are made of clay. The first one being the man in the wall. The second one with grey coloration of his skin is Albrecht Entrati, before he was revealed to be wearing a blue coat. But then we are introduced to this large porcelain concrete looking figure. Anyway, we walk past this massive figure and we move to a room room that opens into a combat state that is reminiscent of a room with Nikola Tesla, but now we have necromech enemies. Now, these necromech enemies are very reminiscent of the steampunk genre with Entrati tech in nature and aesthetic, and if you didn't look closely, if you look on their arms or arm/shoulder area, you'll actually see capsules that are full of seemingly void energy. Now, this also ties into the lore. Not only did Albrecht, but the Entrati family as a whole pioneered the practical use case of void energy as per the Warframe wiki, and because of this, it makes sense that they use the void as an animating energy. Lloyd makes a comment that Entrati's last command to the necromech enemies is to defend. Now, I have to ask, are they defending against something or from getting in, or are they defending getting out? Now, we also hear three-toned thudding heard in the necromech hostile room. The room also has a massive hand in it for some reason, and more arcing electricity in a massive underside of ruins beneath Deimos, which I think is such a cool design feature. Mother always said that there were secrets below the surface of Deimos. Now we have access to the brain room, which a completely new weapon is introduced, Entrati's grimoire, as featured in the very start of the short. Entrati's grimoire has the Requiem symbols on it and basically just spits void energy. It makes further sense that the void is not only an animating energy but a mutating energy as per the Incarnon system, because of the Incarnons being blessed by the void, as this say. So when you're introducing weapons that have been blessed or powered up by the void, of course a book's going to get involved. I'm just waiting for an iPhone 11 to turn into a lightsaber of some sort or a dark dagger. Entrati's grimoire has almost gives me Necronomicon vibes, which is actually really cool. Completely new concept that I've never seen before. A figure in the center of the room that is reminiscent of the man on the wall is staring at the grey painted walls. If you also aren't aware, there is a figure. If you pause and look in on this scene, there is a outline of the man on the wall hiding behind something, almost as a torment, and the man in the wall suddenly gets right up in your ears and says rap tap tap or rap tap tenno, and the walls just fly open. Entrati's labs, which were sealed long ago, have been reopened by the man in the wall. Lloyd remarks that this great indifference, now if you don't know, the great indifference is another name for the man on the wall. The desolate tile set from here on out shows that there are eyes in the walls, reinforcing an ever-present watchful eye. The lidless eye is also a name for the man of the wall. The walls are grey as well. Because they're grey, it's also symbolic of the man of the wall. A new sand-based concrete faction with an aesthetic somewhere between the Bionicle sand zombies. They also have the same aesthetic as Zaku, as they both seem very modular and are held together by strings of the void, like thread. Overall, these void-based thralls are part of the Murmur faction, which is going to be introduced as part of the Whisper in the Walls expansion. A flash and screeching of an old subway train comes across the screen, seemingly popping in and out of existence as quickly as it came, and Lloyd remarks this to be some form of trap. Now, it isn't a trap. The fact that it blips in and out of frame very quickly, being teleported, why through here specifically, I do not know. The pod that was from earlier in the cutscene is revealed to be some form of stasis chamber. Now, I use stasis chamber as a reference because if we are looking at this scene as if it is Albrecht and Entrati getting in with Bingus into the same pod that this butler figure got into, we can assume that this was thousands of years before the time of the Tenno. This figure actually turns out to be the original Lloyd servant. We teleport back to what is identified as our hub. I'm going to assume that this is a general area where players congregate and we can accept missions to then go out and complete. Lloyd Prime comments, the vessels are unfinished, like a book one might one day return to. Yeah, it is then revealed that after interacting with the 90s tech PC on the desk, your Warframe drops to the ground and transference sound effect plays. Giant clay entity starts moving. The implication of we can embody even larger things that are transference compatible. The clay giant has robotic movements and jitters. And we then get a slow pan to focus in, only for it to switch over to Into the Void by 9 Inch Nails. We have a figure named Arthur. Arthur destroying Analog's TV mixed with a strain of the infestation that we have never seen before. Why the infestation has merged with 90s technology, I do not know. And this is also the introduction to another character named Owie. This seemingly is a timeline where the infestation merges with 90s tech and isn't as far into the future as the origin system is. Weaponized Excalibur holding an AK-47 battling the retrocide infestation on a train, and then Owie going on to say that should have found that bastard on day one. Dr. Entrati might be the reason behind the virus. Owie is then heard screaming and making mag noises. Now Kalymos reappears. A figure from the start makes an appearance after being shot in the coffin. Seems to be Albrecht entirely from our timeline. Albrecht says, "You are late." And if you look in the background, it is 11:59, a minute before the turn of the century. Now, at 12 a.m., or January 1st, 2000, Entrati grins, a wild grin, which is reminiscent of the Man on the Wall, this being a version of Albrecht Entrati that has been influenced by the Void and is also the main villain. Now, that is absolutely everything I could glean from TennoCon, and specifically the 27-minute time slot at the very end of the 7-hour stream. Thank you very much for watching, listening. Do not go bye.